was like running back 14 his second year. So he's been a running back one in pretty much every league, all but 1 year. And there's something to be said for that in terms of consistency too, as far as being out there and putting up points.
We have gift shops along every little highway that have Bigfoot merch for sale because all along hundreds of years of native storytelling is sightings.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is episode 4 of Playernormal Activity, and with me today is a very special guest. You've seen him all over, and that's quite literally YouTube. You can find him on different websites, Twitter. He's got great Instagram. It's Bo McBrayer. He is the king of spice, as you've probably known him on all these sites. He mainly does work in the DFS, Dynasty, and Devi realms, but he brings the spice with everything that he does. You can find his pecan takes all over Twitter for football and golf. He is a writer and video content creator for sites such as Fantasy Pros, Going for Two, Team Rise or Fall, In Between Media. It's on the Stacks app, and he works with Scott over on the Nimble with Numbers site, where they do a lot of great DFS stuff every year, mainly during this season. And last but not least, he is the proprietor of Big Time Flavor Company, where you can find things such as the Amigo All-Purpose Seasoning, it's taco season, or taco season, I think you go with the pronunciation for that one. The Shelby Street Heat Nashville Hot Blend. My favorite, the Hot Box Gourmet Hot Sauce, and the Smoke Shack Barbecue Rub as well. It is all great stuff. If you like spice, you need to go check that out and get an order in because it is amazing. And I do buy that myself. I just put another order in for some more Hot Box batch because I'm the only one in my family that really likes spicy stuff. But let me tell you, if you like spice with your food or your fantasy takes, Bo is your guy. Bo, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day here in California. I would be hoping to cut out of work early today so I can enjoy it instead of being cooped up in my office. But it is what it is. I think we're going to have a good day because when it's sunny and you can always escape into the sunny realm, and it's always the hope that gets you excited.
Yeah, we don't have a whole lot of sun here in Wisconsin. It is a little bit dreary and in the 40s, and it'll bounce back up probably to the 60s this weekend because that is what spring in the Midwest does. But I'm glad to hear that you're having a great day there.
I like to
And
say that NorCal is sunny Wisconsin, like warm Wisconsin, because we have just as much cheese and dairy as Wisconsin, but we just have nicer weather.
sounds like a nice selling point, actually, if you're looking to move out there. And I don't know, my wife always wants to move. I don't know if NorCal will be a place for us, but she definitely likes warmer places.
Oh, she's gonna get every bit of it and more in the summertime. We get up to 110, 115 and
Oh,
stuff.
I think she'd be fine with that.
Okay.
But we have an interesting player to discuss today. So we're both Cowboys fans, and we have heard the long and short of the team and this player specifically since he came into the league. And you want to talk about Ezekiel Elliott today, a standout player from Ohio State, drafted 4th overall in 2016. Tell me what you find interesting about Ezekiel Elliott going into this season.
I think that we have to address the elephant in the room, his health. We've seen his numbers decline the last 3 seasons. Most of it's due to his declining health or his propensity to not just miss time, but more like play through nagging injuries, like last year with a sprained PCL, patellar injury. He was not 100%, but he didn't miss any games. He was out there. He missed 1 or 2 games, but it was more like he was out there and costing the team efficiency from the running back position. And you're starting to hear the murmurs of Tony Pollard get louder. And I myself love Tony Pollard as he's my favorite Cowboys player, but he's not in the same realm of talent and football ability as Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott is one of the most highly skilled running backs in the NFL to this day. And whether or not he can realize his full potential athletically comes down to his health. So lately, it's been hard to expect that from him because he has had so many miles on the tires. But I think that if he has a fortunate season where he's not banged up, I do foresee him putting forth running back 1 numbers, if not top half of the running back 1 numbers. So top 5 or 6 running back numbers are always within the realm of possibility for Ezekiel Elliott because of his role in that offense.
Do you think the decline of that offensive line over the past few years from where it's been to has played a significant role for that?
It did to a certain degree. It was so elite when he first started. When they had Travis Frederick, you had a healthy Tyron Smith. You had Zach Martin was young, but he was a stud from day one, especially that left side of the line where you have Martin and Smith and then Frederick at center. And then over the last couple of years, Smith hasn't been healthy. Martin has been healthy, but he's been moved around the line to just fill in blanks. And then, of course, Frederick retired, so we're left with Tyler Biadasz, and he's a decent player. You can't really say Tyler Biadasz is doing a bad job. He's doing a good job. He's just not Travis Frederick. He's not an all-pro. And Zeke has seen less room to run in, and he's not the dynamic speed threat that Tony Pollard is. So he's not as exciting to watch on tape. And people that watch football, they want to see exciting big plays. And young Zeke was definitely full of those because he had a lot more pep in his step back in those days. And he also had bigger lanes to run through. I don't know that he has the explosion to get to the outside and press the zone reads like he used to. And I think that's why his efficiency's really dropped off, is he's getting less smaller running lanes. He has lost a step to really make that outside zone concept that the Cowboys run really work. That's why Tony Pollard looks so much better on tape, is because he's got more speed. He's more of a bursty player, and he can press those outside zone runs just a little bit better. And of course, he's a home run threat on every play, and Zeke really isn't anymore.
Yeah, looking at his just points per game, because I know people like to go into that more than just where they finish overall for the year, although overall finish does matter because that also tells you about their availability, that they were playing a lot. But it's gone from in the 20s the first 3 years to 19 in 2019, then about 15 the past 2 years. But still, his worst finish of his career, and this is through the fantasy season, so it's usually kicking out that last game of the season for the actual team, was like running back 14 his second year. So he's been a running back one in pretty much every league, all but 1 year. And there's something to be said for that in terms of consistency, too, as far as being out there and putting up points.
And really, with the running back position, what is more important than your role in an offense, especially his role in a high-powered offense? That offense is still going to be above average the next year, even without Amari Cooper, even without Cedric Wilson, even without Michael Gallup for the first portion of the season. Is they're going to lean on that running game. They're going to lean on the production of their running backs. And if Dak Prescott's pushing the ball down the field and putting them in scoring position many times like he did last year, guess who they're going to give the ball to inside the 10-yard line? It's always going to be Ezekiel Elliott if he's on the field. It just comes down to opportunity. He's always going to have the opportunity to score lots of fantasy points with a very high floor for production for coming from touchdowns.
1 second. I'm going to get these kids out of here. They broke into my little room down here. So looking at where he's ranked currently, after we're talking about his production and his availability over the past, basically all of his career, but certainly the past couple of years when people have been down on him, Fantasy Pros have him cumulatively sitting at around running back 17. Where do you have him personally going into this season?
For redraft, I have him at running back 13 or 14. He's been vacillating around that Aaron Jones area where you have the same kind of competition for the touches. And I think he's a little bit behind Jones because Jones is more of a receiving threat at this point. But at the same time, I have Zeke has more of a touchdown. And that might change because Aaron Jones might become even more of a touchdown threat without Davante Adams, because that was an alpha beta situation there in Green Bay where you had Aaron Jones and Davante Adams were like the 1A and 1B for scoring touchdowns in the red zone for Green Bay. Zeke still has that advantage as the main benefactor of scoring opportunities in Dallas, and Aaron Jones might get an upgrade from the absence of Davante Adams. But I do have him a little bit higher than the consensus for redraft. For Dynasty, I'm the kind of guy that likes to harness youth from the get-go, and so I've already offloaded most of my Zeke shares in Dynasty, and I usually do that around age 24 and a half to 25 before their value just naturally drops from the age factor. Whether it's real or not, you have to account for when your asset is at peak value, and I see Zeke as a depreciating asset, which can still win you some games, make no mistake. But in a Dynasty, I'm looking at the next 2 to 3 years. And I think after this coming season, they're probably going to opt out of that last 2 years just to save the massive cap hit that they're going to see. And after that, we don't know what Zeke's going to become. He might become your Jordan Howard type guy where he's not really looked upon as more than a scoring, a fall in the end zone kind of guy. We don't know at this point what he's going to develop into, but I don't think it's going to be a top 24 running back after he leaves Dallas.
Yeah, on that for the dynasty point of view for this. So the next 2 years he's got like a $30 million cap hit, and then I think it's $6 million after 2023. So they're locked into him for 2 years here. It seems then because that
Yeah.
30 million cap hit, if they get rid of him, I don't know how people
Well,
say the cap isn't
I think
real.
they will consider it after the season because you don't want two of those hitting you, but you can live with one. It's like the Matt Ryan principle where they felt like they could trade Matt Ryan even with a massive cap hit and just have the whatever team that they're deep pick up some of that money. That I think that they're not going to be opposed with a larger salary cap in general. And after next season, they're not going to be opposed to cutting bait on $30 million to save for the future. I don't think that they're going to be afraid to do that, especially if Zeke has a down year. If he has a good year, they're going to keep him for 23 and then let him go after there. But it's a gnarly cap number. He represents a huge number. So next year, even if it's a dead cap hit of 30 million, they're still going to save a good amount on their total number of what he represents.
So with their running back room pretty much being, like we said, a year or two probably at most left, Pollard's an unrestricted free agent after this year, and they have a whole bunch of unknowns, late round guys, free agent pickups. What do you see them doing? Do you think that Pollard's a guy that they're going to look to resign, or they're going to end up drafting someone in the later round here this year next?
I think this is what they've been planning on doing. They didn't want to let Zeke go at the juncture where they did give him an extension. It was too big of an extension. It wasn't very well structured for the team side of it. It was a very player friendly deal. Pollard, I think they can priority re-sign Pollard at a much lower price tag because unless he goes out and Zeke gets hurt and then Pollard becomes the guy and just completely goes ballistic, they're going to be able to re-sign Pollard a lot easier and keep him as a cog in that offense. On the other hand, I think that they're best suited really hitting at least one running back in this year's draft, maybe two. And a couple guys that kind of fit that mold are you have James Cook out there. They want guys that can press the outside zone. And so James Cook is out there. They have Pierre Strong out there from South Dakota State that they just fit the offense the same way Pollard does. But I don't think that they need a thunder and lightning approach per se. They just need a committee where you have healthy bodies and younger bodies that have the speed and burst to make that offense click like it's supposed to.
Do you think Jerry's learned his lesson about drafting running backs this high?
Yes, and I think that he's got shinier things he can look at this year where wide receiver is obviously not a high priority for Dallas right now, but obviously if Traylon Burks falls to 24, they're gonna pounce on him as fast as ever. At the same time, I don't know that Burks is worth the 24th pick. But for Jerry Jones to see an Arkansas kid there, an exciting prospect, he's not going to miss that opportunity to take that pick. So it goes without saying that if Traylon Burks is there at 24, he's going to be a Dallas Cowboy. Later on, I don't really mind him going after a running back in the second, third, or fourth because there's a big group of running backs that are pretty damn good in that area. And he could just pretty much ask Kellen Moore what kind of guy he wants there and which guy pops out on film, which guy looks like he could fit the offense the best. And I think you can go with a number of guys as late as the fifth round that would be viable rotational players from year one.
All right, we will know the answer to that soon here, and it will be interesting to see how it plays out with Zeke if he has have that bounce back year just in terms of efficiency, because that's really what's kept him down, to your point, the past 2 years, really. And hopefully they'll be addressing that offensive line, too. There's a good offensive line group here that they can use to boost that and just help the offense as a whole and rebound sort of to where they had hoped to be.
It's not a sexy class by any stretch, but it's a class that really caters to Dallas Cowboys needs.
Any final words on Zeke you want to go over?
The only thing I'm really worried about with Zeke is that he's breaking fewer tackles. And that's not a good thing for a guy who basically made it his whole his whole farm. Everybody loves Zeke because he breaks tons of tackles. He's a business decision type guy in the second half. He's not that guy anymore, and that does worry me.
Yeah, his broken tackles have gone down a lot, and yards after contact per attempt is going down, like all of that, to your point. He just, with the amount of wear and tear from college and then pros he's had on him, it's hard to keep that up, and not many players can do it. All right, we are going to move from the football field to the 40. But before we do that, I want to thank everyone for watching, listening, however you're getting this. If you are on YouTube, thank you. hopefully you're already subscribed, but if not, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit the like button so that we know you like this, and leave us a comment if you have any thoughts on Ezekiel Elliott or what we're going to be getting into next. Of course, our next part of this is our paranormal topic, and Bo, living out there in NorCal, I mean, that's where the granddaddy of all the Bigfoot stuff came from, and you get some Bigfoot information to share with us as well.
Yeah, I even grew up in the Mendocino National Forest, which is in the Yollabully mountain range part of the coastal range, the big, long coastal range that extends all the way up into the Cascades of the Pacific Northwest. And up in those hills, a lot can be derived from folklore from the native tribes all throughout Northern California have some reference of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, and it's everywhere. We have gift shops along every little highway that have Bigfoot merch for sale, because all along hundreds of years of native storytelling is sightings and all sorts of references to a human-like animal that lives in the deep wilderness, which we're talking deep wilderness, some of the most inhospitable terrain you're ever going to find in on the planet. And there's so many hidden caves, there's so many mountain passes and canyons that aren't accessible to people with any kind of vehicle. And so it really, even if there's not a Bigfoot anymore, I don't know that there's one living anymore, but I do know that there was probably something at one point in time and for a long time. And there's just no way to convince me that it's not something that at least was real at one time, because there's just too many coincidences and there's too many ways to say that the tribal leaders basically worshipped Sasquatch or Bigfoot for hundreds of years as the prototypical alpha mammal, like the apex predator.
Yeah, stories of Bigfoot, it started, and it's not as much written down and everything, but as the continent started being settled by Europeans, there's still, from the native tribes, to your point, they would start hearing it on the East Coast, and it worked its way almost like they were pushing it more and more westward until that was sort of the last frontier, not only for us, but then possibly these creatures too, with those forests, some of those old growth forests that are still there, to your point. I mean, you would have to only be walking. You can't drive anything through some of those.
Yeah, there are places that I know about where the only vehicle you could possibly use is a horse. And that's like, we're talking steep incline, slippery slopes into deep canyons with heavy brush. And then there's caverns carved into the hillsides all over the place. We're talking thousands of square miles of nothing but trees and canyons and brush. And it burns every year, but it's the craziest terrain. And there's so many wildlife. They're like just like studying the ocean biology. We've only scratched the surface of the living organism in our oceans. I think that there's something at play there in our deepest wilderness areas. And up here in Northern California, up through the Cascade Range, there are so many places that humans haven't seen in hundreds of years.
Now, do you or anyone in your family have any sort of anecdotes or stories that have been passed down over time?
Yeah, my stepdad, he passed away last summer, but he was all about Bigfoot research. He would go Bigfoot hunting every summer, and we're talking, you're taking backpacks and canteens and you're roughing it for a week. And I never went on one of those trips with him, but I've been camping with the man, and it's basically you tell your loved ones where you are by coordinates, and you go out there and you look for signs. You're basically hunting for an animal, and it's an animal that could kill you if it was real and right in front of you. So that's what he prepared for. And he said he found signs, physical signs, audible signs that something was out there that he had never come across in all of his travels through the world. It gives you that chill, like that primal edge you get just when if you've ever been hunting. The thrill of the hunt is something you can never match, because you get a part of yourself that becomes more like an animal. And it's a real thing. And I got it when I was hunting different big game, but he wasn't hunting for a kill. He was hunting for information, for discovery. And he still had to go through the tracking. Tracking an animal of any kind is difficult, but he said he found signs. He has cast footprints that he's saved. He has audio recordings of nighttime just setting up microphones. He set up trail cameras, which didn't yield anything other than coyotes and mountain lions, and bears. lots of bears. But yeah, it's the kind of thing where if you had a full scale effort, it would take thousands of people and thousands of man hours to triangulate the forest in places where you can't even get a mule down there. And yeah, it's gonna take somebody being in the right place at the right time and with a video that's at today's quality.
No, it's not there yet, but do you think drone technology in the future, as it gets smaller, do you think there's any benefit to using those at some point when the technology gets there?
Yeah, I mean, if you could navigate the canopy of trees, then I guess it would be something that would work a little bit better. You cover more ground for sure, especially from above. At the same time, getting close to something like that that's crafty, that understands that terrain better than any animals that live in those areas, they know how to be hidden. Their whole job is to stay alive. And so they're going to be hidden from sight. If there's any semblance of noise that they don't recognize, they're going to hunker down and hide. It's the same thing. Like deer are afraid, but they are camouflage experts, and they will hunker down in the deepest manzanita brush, and you could be sitting right next to it, and unless you hear a twig snap or a breath, you're not going to know it's there.
And even with the dead bodies, things like that do not last long in a forest. Even if you think where I am, which certainly isn't the same sort of climate with that constant heat, but you can have a deer that gets hit by a car and is in a ditch in December, and come March, there's going to be nothing but bones left, if that, from animals picking it apart.
24 hours without a trace.
Yeah, so it doesn't surprise me that they haven't found a body of one of these, like you said, if they do exist, just because one, if it is a social creature, they probably take care of the bodies in some fashion, whether it's burying it or disposing of it otherwise. And two, if not, nature has a way of just taking care of that itself.
Breaks it down, disperses everything as a supply.
Now, with all of the woods and forests and national parks and everything out there too, with all the people that go missing each year in the national parks, do you think there could be anything to someone gets across the wrong creature like that? It can happen with bears and mountain lions. Do you think there's anything to these animals being hostile if you get in the wrong place at the wrong time?
Maybe in a defensive way, but I wouldn't say that they're aggressive, because if they're aggressive, we'd have more sightings. It's just the same with bears and mountain lions, as we see those every time we go out there. Like my wife and I still camp off the grid all the time, and we see bears and mountain lions and pretty much every other large-bodied mammal out there, and they don't really have human fear, but they do keep their distance. Like they respect what humans are capable of, which is obviously killing anything in their sight. And really, it comes down to, if this was an aggressive creature, it would be sighted more often. You'd see instances where an overly hungry creature would go out of their normal modus of figuring out food and attack, like mountain lions attack joggers because they see them as prey when they're running away. Or you see bears that, like, a human gets in their way trying to dig through their trash cans. That's really the only reason a bear is going to attack you, unless you're next to their cubs in the springtime.
Yeah.
I don't see anything other than a defense mechanism. I don't see it as something that you'd have to worry about. Like maybe if you cornered one, yeah, you'd be in big trouble. But it's not something where I expect any contributions to come from being the cause of a disappearance. Most of those people that disappear, if they're found at the bottom of a ditch, bottom of a canyon, and as you can see, the search and rescue crews, it takes a half a day to get a dead body out of the bottom of a canyon because the terrain's so rough.
Yeah.
Now picture thousands of square miles of the same exact stuff, where there's just no way to tell.
Now, have you seen or heard anything that made you think, hey, maybe one of these is out in the area by you when you were out hiking or camping or hunting or anything?
Not personally. Most of what we've become aware of in our area is just your run-of-the-mills. You have really solid ecosystem, and I think if there was something that big in the ecosystem, like we used to have grizzly bears in this area and they're extinct now. You have to go farther north to get any kind of Kodiak bear. So we just have black bears, but grizzly bears, apex predator. We used to have gray wolves all over the place in our area. Now there's only a handful, and they're all wearing trackers. But like that kind of mammal, especially a carnivorous mammal, would make the ecosystem completely different. And that's one way you could tell if something is possible, is if you go into an area and the ecosystem doesn't feel right, like you feel like you're not the top of the chain sitting there as a human being with a firearm and a knife, and you still don't feel like you're the top of the food chain, like you don't see the deer running around, you don't see any rabbits running and bouncing about, you don't even see snake like hanging out in the sunshine. It's a pretty good chance that there's something bigger and stronger and better at hunting than you out there. But usually where you can find lots of herbivores, even as large as deer, running around all the time, then you have ecosystem where there's hierarchy where if you're at the top of the food chain, you're going to see food.
And I think to a large degree, a lot of us humans are just not in tune with that side of us anymore because when we don't go out, and hunt or hike or just live outside, by and large, people are in buildings and over generations have learned to feel safe. Whereas,
go touch some grass.
and even if you're just out hiking in a real wooded area in a national park, you can get that feeling that, all right, something's going on here because the woods just quiets down. It's almost like there's no noise. You get that hair on the back of your neck just standing up, and you do still have that fight or flight in you. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that sometimes when they run across that.
The senses have been dulled overall, yes. I'm thankful that I have a pretty good keen sense of things out there because just from the experience.
I think this is one that we just may never know the complete truth to, but I'll tell you about that Patterson Gimlin encounter, back that famous one video that everyone knows, whether they know what it's called or not. The fact that that's still the best proof, if you want to call it out there, of Bigfoot to this day, just in terms of you either know that was a living creature that no one had identified before, really, or it's the best costume ever possibly made because no one's replicated it or found anything close to it then or now.
And people have tried to recreate that video from all sorts of angles, wearing the best costumes that movie producers can make, and it still looks fake as hell. And just the fact that there are people out there like myself who think that is a real creature, just the way the gait, the build, the way it moves, that's a real animal. And my belief is that Bigfoot is extinct, but it definitely lived up until pretty recently.
Back in, I think it was the 60s, mid 60s when that video came out. So yeah, who knows if that was the last one or the last one in North America or soon to be.
Just like you said, it might be something we never find out about because we're talking where that thing lives or lived is not where humans go.
Yeah, and the ones that do go there, boy, that's not an easy place to be hauling around. Cell phones, it's easier now, but equipment for getting evidence of a creature like that you're hauling around in a big old backpack, and then video evidence, even if you get it nowadays with what people are able to do with videos, you're probably going to be called a fraud unless you get something of a body at this point.
And that's what flies in the face of real people that want to know if it's real. If I was out there hunting for a Bigfoot and I saw one firsthand, I would just keep it to myself. I would keep that to myself. And I think that's how a lot of people are. If you're equipped as a person to be in that terrain for an extended period of time and you actually do make that discovery, I'm not telling a soul.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that throughout history that either did or either thought they saw something that did just keep it to themselves for a number of reasons, where they didn't want to be called crazy or just be scrutinized, or they didn't want people coming into their land and making a big fuss about it. But there's something to be said about that too.
I know a lot of people that are capable of living down in that terrain, and they don't say a word to anybody. Like, you could tell those people your deepest, darkest secrets, and they would keep them to themselves, take it to the grave. That's just kind of the way it is.
Yeah, that's a different atmosphere for human society at this point too, where it seemingly everything gets posted to everyone automatically these days about your life. And there is something nice about that old way of life where you keep to yourself, you take care of your own, and you don't go causing trouble. Well, I want to thank you for coming on here again to talk about Ezekiel Elliott, Bigfoot, with me today. While we're wrapping up, please let everyone know where they can find you and find all of your content.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Bo_McBigTime. There you'll see basically just my whole life on display, where basically I'm writing about football, writing about golf. I study film for Fantasy Pros and write my rookie profiles. Check out my Khalil Shakir article. It came out today, and then soon to be released, Desmond Ridder. That one's going to be eagerly anticipated because I have a feeling I'm going to get some backlash about my player comp about Desmond Ridder. But it's been a lot of fun to work for Fantasy Pros, Team Rise or Fall, in between media. I'm missing a bunch because I pretty much freelance for every being in the business these days. But it's been a lot of fun. But Bo_McBigTime on Twitter, at BigTimeFlavor_ on Instagram. You referenced my food porn page.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, put a privacy screen on your monitor and check it out. And, of course, go to BigTimeFlavor.co and get yourself a Big Time Flavor. Or you can be like Kraig and just drink hot sauce and order just the Hot Box Gourmet hot sauce by itself. Put it on all your food. Big Time Flavor Co. has been making your mother-in-law's cooking tolerable since 2020.
Thank you again for joining me, Bo. I appreciate it. And remember, everybody, whether you're interested in hearing about Ezekiel Elliott or evil entities, we're going to have you covered here on Playernormal Activity. We'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for watching. If you'd like more great fantasy football content like this, please click the link down below here.